We do have our first candidate here, so we'll get the ball rolling and we'll start. My name is Joseph Weiss. I'm so excited to see everybody here. I think we have an amazing turnout and this is going to go great. A lot of people asked while we were doing outreach, this is my partner in crime, Miriam Zuzunis. She's a small business commissioner. When I moved back here from DC post-Trump elections, I felt a lot of energy and a lot of people invigorated to try and get involved and do more things to really continue the progress that is San Francisco. With the Arab American community, we felt a lot of discrimination, a lot of systemic policies that weren't really in favor with civil liberties, small business interests, etc. And I could feel the energy that a lot of people wanted to finally see some change. A lot of people did ask me while we were doing this outreach, well, what's the point? Why should we spread the word? And I told everyone the same exact thing, that these elections come and go. We have different administrations forever, as long as this country is standing. But today, no matter who wins, I want everyone to know that we're going to win. As a community, no matter who takes the office in City Hall, we're going to continue to have a seat at the table. We're going to have representation. And from now on, as one group, with all the various organizations here that Miriam is going to mention and talk about, we're all thrilled to be one voice, one force, and we're going to be a force to be reckoned with. So, shall we talk about some housekeeping rules? We have each candidate coming one at a time. So, we have Alioto, Jane Kim, Mark Leno, and London Breed. They'll come give an introduction, and then we have Shahid, our moderator. Our moderator as well. We have some predetermined questions that were submitted prior to this event, and then time permitting, I'm going to pass out some note cards, and you can write your question, I'll pick them up, and then we can ask the candidates as well. But please don't distract from the speakers. If you have a question, just wave the card and I'll come get it. And at the end, because I know we have some other candidates and some other people coming who'd like to speak, we'll open up the floor to everybody. Are we all excited?
Yeah.
Great. All right, so we have, thank you. We have Supervisor Alioto who's speaking first, whenever she's ready. Oh. Sorry, I'm nervous, but I'm going to pass the mic to Miriam to say a few words.
Okay, real quick before I introduce former Supervisor Alioto. My name is Miriam. I'd like to thank the Arab Cultural and Community Center for hosting us, and our co-sponsors, the Arab American Grocers Association, and the National Association of Yemeni Immigrants, Jordanian American Association as well. I just want to say our peoples are largely misunderstood. I'd like to think a lot of San Franciscans probably think our conflicts are related or similar to the squabbles of the cyclists versus the drivers in San Francisco. You know, every lane is a bike lane, our lane, not yours. But the reality is, it's been open season on our communities for a while now, whether it's bus ads on Muni calling us savages or bans on the entire sectors where our communities work. But we have to remember we live in a global context, and what happens over there affects us here. The policies we make here matter. The political example we set here matters. So my goal in this is, to create a process of healthy debate, set aside partisanship, both in terms of the traditional American party lines and the divisions sown by decades of imperialism and war. And my goal is to create representation and leadership in our community so we can fight for local gains as well as fight for justice on an international scale. So I'm ready to take another chance on the word democratic and do this thing if you guys are ready to stand by me. Yeah. All right, without further ado, former Supervisor Alioto, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So you can introduce yourself and then I have some predetermined
questions.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. Everybody, thank you very, very much. Whenever I come to an Arab American event, it always looked like my family. Everybody, we all have this, Sicilians, of course, a lot of Arabs in Sicily, all have the same eyes, so it's a very welcoming thing to me. My name is Angela Alioto. I am running for mayor of San Francisco. I'm third generation. My grandfather Alioto came from Sicily in 1889. And my father and grandmother were born in North Beach in San Francisco. So it's three-generation, full-bred Sicilian on all sides. but third generation San Franciscan. Let me just say why I'm running for mayor. I am a civil rights lawyer. I have been for the last 17 years. I represent race, national origin, disability, religion, association, sexual orientation, and gender. I have had incredible successes throughout the United States of America in the courtrooms. As a matter of fact, I won the first Arab American Muslim case in San Francisco federal court against Radio Shack. Was one of my first, and Lucas was one of my first religious victories, and it was a great victory. That was only 4 years ago. So I'm running for mayor, though, as the mother of 4 and grandmother of 5. I'm the only parent. I'm the only one involved and serious about making sure families stay in San Francisco that's in this race. I'm the only parent out of the top 4. But I got into the race because as a supervisor, I did some amazing legislation. It had to do mostly with health discrimination, the MBE laws, the minority business laws, the small business laws, the Small Business Advisory Commission. Those are all very, very important things to me. But I got into this race because of homelessness, because of the amount of people sleeping on the streets, because of the amount of poverty in the streets of San Francisco, in one of the wealthiest cities in the world. So many poor people sleeping on the streets. It's just totally unacceptable. I got into this race because San Francisco looks, for a national newspaper to call us a slum was shocking to me. That just literally is like, okay, stop. We need to do something now. We need to take the poor off the streets. We have the housing. Don't let anyone tell you we don't have a place to put them. We do, and we always have. Gavin Newsom and I did a 10-year plan to put the chronically homeless into their own units with support, meaning medical. So it's permanent supportive housing. Those 3 words are key to housing all of the homeless. The hardest to house are the ones we housed, the chronically homeless, the ones that have been on the street for 4 to 6 years, that are really live on the street. Very hard to get them off. And we got over 4,000 chronically homeless people off the street by 2012. And then tech came to town. And I think this is a major, major issue. When the tech industry came to town, the city government wanted them so badly because of the downturn in 2008, 2009, wanted them so badly that they gave them these ridiculous tax incentives. But when they gave the billionaires, literally, tax incentives, they did not give those tax incentives to the small businesses. They didn't help the small businesses at all. As a matter of fact, so much of this new migration into San Francisco of the employees that belong to these large buildings, so much of it has hurt our small businesses throughout the city. Whether it's on Terraville, whether it's on Lawton, wherever. North Beach is a mess. Half of the stores in North Beach are closed. I've never in my entire life seen anything like that. Half of the stores over here, we were just walking down Terraville yesterday. They're putting MTA, first of all, MTA, DPW, and Park and Rec, they need new directors. Yes. Okay? They need new directors. Yep. They've been there too long. They don't understand what San Francisco needs, and it doesn't seem like they are caring what San Francisco needs, but they're catering to the billionaires in a certain part of District 6, to the detriment of the whole rest of the city. It's quite amazing what's happening. So when I decided to run for mayor, it was principally because of homelessness, dirty streets, congestion, and affordable housing. Nobody can live here. No, do you realize that when politicians talk about when they talk about affordable housing, okay, you're going to build this house at 16th and Mission. We want you to make it 40% affordable. Do you know what 40%, do you know what affordable means? $130,000 salary is affordable. So where are the people that make $50,000, $60,000, $70,000? Where are they? The nurses, the teachers, the firefighters, the officers, police officers, emergency services. We are an earthquake city. We need to keep our emergency services in San Francisco. And to do that, we need to do specific housing. for those categories, nurses, teachers, and emergency services. But I also believe we need to do specific housing for our small businesses in San Francisco because they are in such despair right now, and it's so obvious. If we lose our small districts, our small businesses, our small communities, our cultures, you know, I'm the only one in this campaign who's talking about culture, and I'm talking about culture because, first of all, I'm a Sicilian. Born, you know, I couldn't be more Sicilian. I want North Beach to stay North Beach. I want everybody to leave North Beach alone. Stop picking on the Italians because I'm coming into the mayor's office, so you know you're not going to be able to pick on us anymore. But having said that, you know, the Italians have been under siege over in North Beach. But we have Italy, we have, you name it, every country in the world in this great city is represented, and so we're iconic. We are an iconic city. We're a city that people in other countries talk about San Francisco. You know, and I want to keep it that way, and the only way we're going to keep it that way is our neighborhoods and our small businesses in the neighborhoods. And so I am a neighborhood mayor, and I will make sure that I do all I can to promote the small businesses in San Francisco. And I say this everywhere I go. This is just about all I talk about, because I believe that once we take care of the homeless situation and clean the streets with new directors, and do something about the permitting in this city. Permitting is a disaster in this city in many ways. I mean, I'm sure some of you have permitting issues with your stores, but the restaurants have permitting issues, the builders have permitting issues, people trying to build housing have permitting issues. So all these things are obstacles that the government loves to throw at the citizens. And as a consequence, I'm someone that just goes right to the chase, doesn't let these obstacles hurt who we are, the soul of our city. And so that's why I'm in this race for mayor of San Francisco. I would love to take any questions any of you might have.
So we have,
Oh, wonderful.
I'm you moderating.
Hi.
My name is Daniel Cara. Nice to meet you.
Johnny, how are you?
Thank you, Supervisor.
Good.
So our first question is in regards to the Joint Terrorism Task Force. The San Francisco Police Department pulled out of the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force amid controversy over the Trump administration's travel ban and concerns that participation in the task force might violate local laws protecting immigrants and religious minorities. However, current law enforcement officials said this could weaken efforts to detect and stop terrorism plots in the Bay Area. Do you support the San Francisco Police Department pulling out of the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force? Yes or no, and why?
I don't support it, and I'll tell you why I don't support it. I think that it is very important for the San Francisco Police Department. I'm the only candidate that doesn't support it. I think it's very important for us to, the San Francisco Police Department to speak to the security and for security to speak to us. I think communications are very, very important. Because, you know, we're a city that people, you know, we're a famous city. People go to famous cities. And this is for any kind of terrorist act, especially domestic terrorist act, especially schools. With the domestic terrorist acts that we've had the last, I don't know how long, but the last 4 years have been devastating with terrorist, domestic terrorist acts. And as a consequence, I think as the mayor of the city, who is basically the head over the police department and the liaison with national security, I think it's very important that there be a good relationship. In this race, the divide between the government and the different parts of the government and tech industry and the community is terrible. Nobody speaks to each other. And that's been very, very obvious. But I think that communication is important.
I'm Magda, I'll be another moderator here.
Okay.
So a high concentration of the Arab American families reside in the Tenderloin, Nob Hill, North Beach, and Chinatown neighborhoods. Many students have suffered from anti-Arab and Islamophobic rhetoric that has increased drastically after the election of Donald Trump as president. What will you do as a mayor to ensure the safety and confidence of Arab American youth in SFUSD?
Okay. USD?
Unified School District.
Oh, in the Unified School District. I just came from their talk. Yeah, I'm a civil rights lawyer. I represent many Arabs for many different reasons, just because of the way they're treated at the workplace. I'm a zero tolerance person, and when I say zero tolerance, I mean zero tolerance. You don't call anybody any names. You don't treat anybody any differently because of where they come from or who they are or what they're wearing. And I have to tell you something, I've been extremely successful in the courtrooms of America, here in Houston, in Atlanta. Those were all Arab American cases. You have to fight back. You can't take it. You have to stand up and tell the workplace you're not going to take it. But when it comes to the school system, you know, the minorities in the school system, I saw all the charts this morning. It's just really terrible, the disadvantage a minority child has. The mayor of San Francisco does not have direct jurisdiction over the school district, okay? However, a powerful, strong mayor can take control and be able to fund, I personally did the children's budget for after school and before school. But you know, I believe that the lessons in school of parity, of teaching people not to discriminate, education, 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 I think that's essential because you know something? Some of the kids are not getting that at home. And if they don't get it at home and they're not getting it at school, they won't get it anywhere. Right? They won't get it anywhere. You have to learn to be tolerant, especially if you have parents that are not so tolerant. So education in the schools also. So funding and education, I could affect as the mayor before and after school, but not during the curriculum.
As you know, Prop E is San Francisco's law banning flavored tobacco and nicotine products. Many in the Arab American community not only find Prop E culturally insensitive, but racist because it targets Arab American merchants and consumers. Small businesses are already overregulated. Why ban the sale of these products and not tobacco in general? Do you support Prop E, yes or no?
Well, now you're going to catch me. I wrote the smoking ban, okay? I wrote the first smoking ban in the United States of America. Then I wrote 27 other pieces of legislation that were aimed at Joe Camel, who was getting to our children. But I want you to notice, even though I wrote the first smoking ban in the United States, which by the way went all over the world, the president of Ireland called me just a few months ago to thank me because the health rate, the cancer rate, the emphysema rate, the heart, all of those diseases went down overwhelmingly in the city governments. But I banned smoking in the workplace. I banned it in Candlestick Park. I never banned smoking. There's a big difference. You know, as I understand it, E goes a little further in actually banning the products, okay? And so when they first came to me, I just have to say, I'm pretty sure I'm yes on E, I'm pretty sure. But when they first came to me, I didn't realize they were banning the product. On the other hand, you know, I'm the one that banned cigarettes, so I've got to be honest with you that health was my #1 issue, and the children in the schools evidently have a major issue with this stuff.
Just to follow up with that, I think a lot of people do realize that sentiment. However, you are seeing lax regulation in regards to cannabis and cannabis flourishing. So a lot of people are looking at this as an attack on small merchants who do sell, you know, flavored tobacco and hookah. Right. And a lot of people think that it's just an easy win for politicians. This is something that they can get past. It makes their legislative history look good. So what do you say to that?
Well, I'll tell you something, it's not easy. I've been to many, many stores, like over on Polk Street and over on Haight Street the other day. All of the stores I've gone in have told me they have this problem with what Prop E does to them. And so I don't think that there's any reason. Well, see, it's hard for me to say I believe it, you know. Racism to me is serious. To say it's racist, you know, racism to me is where someone is almost tortured because of who they are, their status as a person, that they can't change. You can't change being black or Arab or Sicilian. You can't change that. You can't change being a woman. So racism to me is a very elevated, serious issue. I would find it very hard to believe that anybody did this specific legislation to be racist against small businesses. I just would find that hard to believe. I think to prove the racial animus of that would be hard to believe. I do know that the arguments they put forward are for children. That's been an education for me, how rampant it is. But the medicinal marijuana, that's going to be a big issue. It's got to be regulated, much more regulated than it is now. And I think that a lot of the small businesses need to be deregulated. I think there are way too many permits needed for a small business. The other day, the tobacco guy was telling me that he paid like 6 taxes on almost the same product.
So that leads me to my next question, which is, do you think San Francisco is small business friendly?
No, I don't. I think it's terrible what's going on. And one of my mailers is finally getting mailed. This has been the saga of running for mayor with the ethics department, but one of my mailers is finally going out. And it is all about neighborhoods and the neighborhood stores and turning around literally the tsunami that is occurring with tech industry. And that tsunami is devastating our small businesses, as I first said. Another issue is, the vacancies of these buildings. When you have a vacancy in the middle of your neighborhood grocery store and you start boarding it up, that vacancy causes a blight in the street. And then you're going to have every other city problem that exists. Like if you go to North Beach, the 500 block of Columbus Avenue has got over 17 vacancies. It's boarded up. So now homeless people are sleeping in front of it, right? And it's filthy dirty because the city doesn't go clean where the homeless people are. So all of that will change. But as Mayor Alioto, I can promise you I will make small businesses my priority. That is my whole campaign. And small businesses and homelessness.
Recent studies have shown that an estimated 25% of vehicle miles traveled in San Francisco are done by TNCs, and 70% of congestion-related traffic violations are committed by TNCs. Do you feel that they should be regulated by the city? And if so, what means are you willing to pursue legally, legislatively, or otherwise to do so?
Okay, what do you call them, TNCs?
Like Ubers and Lyfts.
What does it stand for? What is TNC? Transportation Network.
Oh,
TNC,
I think it's congestion.
Transportation Network.
Transportation network congestion. They know where I stand on this. They've already called me because I'm pretty outspoken about it. We have 60 or 70,000 cars in San Francisco every day. All right, 60 or 70,000 cars that are not taxed. There's no sale tax. They're doing business in the city. My little law firm does business in the city, and I pay business tax. They're not paying any taxes, and this nonsense that they're regulated by the state of California, PUC, and not by us is baloney. They're in our city with a strong advocate in City Hall. You will have someone that will get them regulated and also have them pay taxes, and then the taxes can go to cleaning up and fixing the potholes in our streets. Our streets are a nightmare. Let me just say one thing about MTA. Have you all ever noticed, I have to tell you this because it's a place where we really save money. Have you ever noticed that sometimes they'll tear up a street, they'll put in the new sewer, they'll cover it up, make a new street, and then they'll go back and tear up the same street.
2 or 3 times, yeah.
Unbelievable. Okay, so I stopped him. I said, "Hi, I'm Angela Alioto, what are you doing?" And he said, "We're putting the pavement on the street." They did this 4 times on Columbus Avenue. I said, "But why are you doing it? I saw you put the new street on last month. Why are you doing that?" And he says, "Because we are a sole source contract exemption." I said, "Wait a minute. A sole source exemption contract is when you want a painting and you give a sole source exemption to only a Picasso. You've got to be a Picasso. All right, you guys are digging a hole in the street. How is that a sole source exemption? Because sole source exemption contracts don't have competitive bidding. The efficiency is low, and the efficiency is high when you have a competitive bid, and the cost is low. When you have a sole source exemption, the efficiency is low and the cost is high. So this guy, this subcontractor in the street, he says to me, "Well, tell you the truth, we're putting another street on top. We're going to tear this up, put another one on top, because we have more money in the sole source contract." I said, "Do you see those guys over there that are laying on the street in poverty with sores all over their bodies? How can you possibly waste that money that way?" He said, "Don't talk to us. We're subcontractors. We don't work for the city. The city gave us the contract, right? Well, that's MTA, and that needs to stop, and that's millions and millions and millions of dollars that can go to making the city what we want to make it, which is a healthy city with the backbone of our city, strong businesses. It isn't the chaos that we presently have. I'm sorry, but I had to tell you about those social rights exemptions, because it's massive money that we could be diverting to mental health and to get drug addiction and all of that off the streets.
And that kind of leads me to the next question, which is a large part of the homeless issue in San Francisco, which is everyone's number, a lot of people's.
There's part of the question, you know, what she's gonna do about it.
Yeah, I'm leading up to that, thank you.
Thank you, Father.
As you know, homelessness is a huge issue that affects all San Franciscans, no matter where you live and work. And it's kind of tarnished our reputation in many ways. And that being, you know, a lot of that is systemic, you know, drug abuse and mental illness for these people. So what measures, and I've been around enough to hear many politicians talk about homelessness and how they're going to fix the problem. It's just getting worse. There's people being violently attacked. If you're the next mayor of San Francisco, how are you going to, within the what's your first 60, 90-day action plan to target and, fix this homeless problem?
Okay. There's no person in this race that has my experience. Nobody. I have worked on homeless. I'm Franciscan. I don't know. I'm a member of St. Francis's Third Order, and I started my own order. St. Francis was married to Lady Poverty. Okay, so I have literally spent 45 years of my life contemplating St. Francis's concepts of Lady Poverty and, of course, everything coming from Jesus. So, having said that, everything, the flowers are Jesus, everything is Jesus with St. Francis. And the guy on the street is Jesus with St. Francis and with me. We did a homeless plan. Gavin Newsom and I did a homeless plan in 2004. We put 60 people in a room that hated each other. They hated each other. We had the Coalition on Homelessness, and we had the Hotel Council, the Restaurant Association, the Archdiocese. We had everybody. We had everybody in the city, the interfaith group that was concerned about homelessness. After 6 months, we put together a plan that we started immediately, and within 8 years, we housed 4,600 chronically homeless people on the street, 4 to 6 years, triple diagnosed. We housed them in a unit of their own with a minute clinic, which is a mini hospital on the first floor. So there would be a mini hospital close to the housing within 7 blocks. And we charted them throughout the city. In 2012, when Gavin went to be lieutenant governor, and I went back trying my cases, Tech came to town. And instead of keeping the buildings in the pipeline for the formerly homeless, we were so successful. You all, please believe me, that was the most successful program ever. And we got more federal funding than any city agency has ever gotten, because I made the federal homeless czar my best friend. My best friend. I mean, his name's Philip Mangano, and he has housed more human beings than you could ever imagine. And he's on our campaign with us now, because the problem's gotten so out of hand. So to answer your question specifically, the first thing I will do, I will start with the tents. I will start 1 tent by, like Mother Teresa said, 1 tent by 1 tent. There are only about 150 of them. They're the most chronic people in the streets. We're going to go tent by tent, and we're going to you triage them either into, well, first of all, you have drug rehab and alcohol rehab, but then you go either into medical facilities or go into a unit. Now, the 4,600 that we put into permanent supported housing, which is a unit, 94% lack of recidivism. 94% of those people are still in the unit we put them in 10 years ago. That's a huge success rate. So yesterday, I called, so my first job will be the tents. And then at the same time will be, did you all see the BART station video on Channel 5? Okay. This is San Francisco. This is the United States. This is not a third world where no, I was so stunned that they could be slumped over with the vomit next to them, the next person slumped over, the next person slumped over. These are literally our brothers and sisters. We just walk by them while they're slumped over, killing themselves. It's stunning to me. And as a consequence, that will be right there with the tents, is going to be taking anybody doing drugs, those serious kinds of drugs, off the streets immediately and getting them help. And there are very many legal ways to do that without a conservatorship. But we cannot let them sit there and kill themselves. We can't. As a civilized society, we must help them. And so that will be one of my very first, I mean, that just stuns me that that's going on. And plus all of our children are seeing this. I want San Francisco to be a children's city again. Families. We have 14% families. When I was president of the Board of Supervisors, we had 30%.
One more question? Sure. We are graciously hosted today by the Arab Cultural and Community Center.
Right.
However, our space is old and limited, and we have been petitioning the city for years to help get us a remnant city property to build a center and housing for our elders. How are you willing to help?
Oh, I'm going to do that. I would, that's funny, the Irish want a potato famine statue they've been trying to get for 15 years. So when I went to speak to the Irish, I said to them, where do you want it? I will put it there, where do you want it? You know, I just stop the bureaucracy. These things are really important, you know. Absolutely I would help you, especially for the elderly, get a place, because there are a lot of empty spaces in San Francisco, in the thousands, and nobody's offering them up. But no, with me, believe me, you are going to see a cultural renaissance, a cultural and a human suffering renaissance is going to stop what's been happening to our city. So absolutely, I would be right. I would love to help you. See, that's fun. Dealing with homelessness is not quite so fun. But getting you a place for the elderly, we did that in the homeless plan. We had 4 stories formerly elderly, then 2 stories disabled, and then the top 4 stories were the elderly. And so we had mixed housing in several of our units. So I'm very good at that.
So, one more question from the audience in regards to San Francisco's sanctuary city policy. What are your plans for changing San Francisco's sanctuary city policy? What are your views on the policy as well?
Well, so is this about all the news of the last 3 days, or is this not all? Okay. All right, I got it. I haven't been asked that yet. I've been out on the campaign trail, so I've done pretty well without getting yelled at. I wrote the sanctuary law. I wrote it in 1991. And I wrote it because at Club Elegante, which is a massive club in the Mission District, Club Elegante got raided one night. The police called the INS at the time now, called the ICE, and they arrested 400 men and women that night. And the next day, they put them on airplanes. Okay? So as a president of the Board of Supervisors, and as a supervisor, it was just before, because I continued doing the law, we had all these children sitting on the stairs without their parents. It was absolutely a crisis situation. So I had hearing after hearing, after we reunited the kids, I had hearing after hearing about making San Francisco, if you are fleeing a war, if you're fleeing a country that's trying to recruit your child to be a member of a gang, if you're fleeing a country where there's famine and you can't eat, you are welcomed in the city of St. Francis. It's that easy. So that's what I wrote, and that's what I did. Then in '94, I went back and did an amendment that excluded felons, because for some reason, felons were using my law to stay in San Francisco after serious felonies, murder, rape, child molestation, serious stuff. So I said, no, we're not protecting felons, okay? In 2013 and 2016, Supervisor Campos went back and amended my law and added serious felons. So as the law is right now, you can commit 3 serious felonies within a 7-year period and not be deported, okay? I don't buy that. So my ordinance that I introduced 4 days ago, believe me, I'm shocked at how much uproar this ordinance has caused. I really am. I mean, I'm shocked at some of the statements of some of these politicians. And one thing that it really showed me is the lack of connection between these politicians and people. It's just a total disconnect. So I don't know why they're so excited, but to call me a racist is a little ridiculous. when I wrote the law, and I'm a civil rights lawyer, and I've spent 35 years of my life or more taking care of the poor and sick. So they can call me whatever they want, the public is not going to believe it. My ordinance takes out serious felons from being protected under the sanctuary law. It's that easy. If you have a serious felony, you cannot get protection of the sanctuary law. It never included felons. It should have never included felons. Because you know what? When you put groups of felons in that are allowed to use the protection, you dilute the importance to the families and the people that really need the sanctuary law because they're fleeing serious situations. And so I'm very adamant about this. I'm not backing down. It'll be on the November ballot, and I predict it'll have over 70% of San Francisco voting for it. What do you all think? You know the felon, you know,
Why didn't they change the law in the first place?
to protect felons.
Yeah.
To protect felons.
Yeah.
Why do they want to protect
Why did
You
they?
got me. I keep asking.
Why did it happen?
Why did they amend it to add felon?
Yeah.
Oh, you got me. I honestly don't know. Maybe, you know, someone after me can tell you. I've asked Scott Wiener, Mark Leno, oh Lord. Let's see, Scott Wiener, Mark Leno, David Campos, they're all yelling at me on Facebook right now. I can hear them. I'm Sicilian, I'm not sleeping. Stop yelling at me. On the other hand, I can hear the immigrants that are working hard that are saying thank you. And I hear them all the time. But having said that, I keep asking them, why do you want to protect these felons? Why? Give me one reason. They can't give me one reason. Go on Twitter and look, they can't answer it. Give me one reason you want to save a convicted felon from being reported. I don't get it. But I'm doing it now, and I'm taking the hit, and that's fine with me because I'm doing what's right.
And we have one last question.
I think you said that 3 questions. I love it.
It's about the environment, and with climate change deniers taking prevalence in our federal government, how will San Francisco continue to take the lead on issues related to the environment, climate change, recycling, and so on?
Right. Let me just say that 2.5 years ago, with the help of Mark Benioff, who I'm sure some of you know at Salesforce, we did a huge campaign on the East Coast to welcome Papa Francesco's encyclical Laudate Si, which is an encyclical about saving Mother Earth, taken from the Canticle of the Sun by St. Francis. So when we got involved in that massive environmental effort internationally, we all went to Paris and we experienced the climate change pact that we entered into with Obama, which was fascinating. And we brought back a lot of the tenets of the Laudate Si book and have attempted to apply them to the state of California. Jerry Brown's been incredible. Jerry Brown he went to the Vatican with me. Jerry Brown, Ed Lee, we all went for 2 weeks in the summer of 2015 and came back with all of the amendments, all of the different ways of changing government to make them understand climate change is no joke. And so I would implement all of those suggestions from C10 in Paris and also from the Vatican. But I have to say, Jerry Brown's done it on a state level that's formidable. He's really quite a genius when it comes to, evidently when it comes to budgets, and also when it comes to climate change. Very, very important issue.
Are there any final remarks you'd like to share with our community?
Well, thank you very, very much. Thank you very, very much. I love all the questions. I really appreciate coming here. I got excited when I saw this on my schedule. I've been to about 10 other places today, and it just really goes to show the culture of San Francisco. I went to the Chinese Mother's Day with the opera singers at the library. And then I've been to so many places I can't even remember where they all are. But I was really excited to come here. I don't know, is Fred McGonagall still around? No? Oh no, he passed away. I was afraid to ask that question. Fred and I were very, very close. We went around to all the grocery stores and put my signs in it when I won the board presidency. He was an incredible guy. But I was excited to come because, of course, I have a serious relationship with this community. I always have, and I always will. So I would really appreciate your vote. Number one. You can make anybody else 2 or 3, that's fine. Numero uno, molto importante. Okay, thank you all very, very much from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. There is some space up front. I see 2 seats. We can make some room, so please feel free to come in a little bit. The questions have been great. I think it would actually be smoother if we did our predetermined questions and then open it to the floor. I didn't even bring enough note cards, so that's fine. One side note before we have Senator Leno on the floor is we do have 2 people doing voter registration. It's very important. Please, at any time, sidestep. We have 2 people here with their clipboards up for voter registration. So that's how it all happens. Thank you to Supervisor Alioto. And let's come in for a couple more seconds. And we have Senator Mark Leno here. Thank you. Senator. Thank you so much. How are you? Nice to see you. There's the mic. It's all yours. It's all mine. So we have an intro at your leisure. We have some predetermined questions, and then we'll open it to the floor.
Okay.
Thank you.
Got a plan. Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. This is a full house. Congratulations. Thank you for participating in the democratic process of electing our next mayor of San Francisco. Nothing could be more important, and so I'm very honored to be invited to join with you today. My name is Mark Leno. I am a small business owner here in San Francisco for the past 40 years. I started a sign company in the Richmond back in 1978, and we're about to have our 40th anniversary, and I'm very proud of that. As my business grew, I sort of gravitated to community service. There was no shortage of work to be done. And then overnight, in 1998, all of my community service became public service when I accepted an appointment to the County Board of Supervisors. And I was a little ambivalent about that appointment at first. I had no background in public policy. I didn't know that I could keep my business going, putting in 80 hours a week at City Hall for a job that paid $30,000 a year. It went to $120 the year that I left, but it was $30,000 while I was there. But I'm so glad that I did. It was a great privilege and opportunity to be able to enter into public service and to serve 4 years on the County Board of Supervisors before being elected to the State Assembly for 6 years and then State Senate for 8 years. And of course, San Francisco being the best district to represent in the entire state. And I say that specifically because it is the best educated district, it is the most politically sophisticated district, and it's the most engaged district. And I always felt that my constituents gave me wings. They wanted me to fly and be bold and to speak out and to represent San Francisco values in Sacramento. So it was a very fortunate opportunity for me. And we did some great things. We did some very important things. I chaired the budget committee for the state senate, 6 of my 8 years there. And sometimes it's good to be budget chairman, because at the depths of our City College accreditation crisis, when a now known to be rogue commission was trying to decertify us and take our accreditation away, we had ever fewer students enrolling. And since state funding is based on enrollment, the funding got cut. Well, then the courses got cut further, and even fewer students enrolled, and it was in a death spiral. But I was able to work in a bipartisan fashion to access $120 million to save City College at the depths of that accreditation crisis. And of course, it is now thriving today, and we're rebuilding enrollment through Free City. And yes, and I am set on extending that idea that we want to make a promise with our young students, even as early as the 4th grade, that if they study hard and attain academic achievement and they have a dream of higher education, we now have a spot for them at City College, a free spot there. Once they get their AA degree, we want to have a free spot for them at San Francisco State University so they can get their bachelor's degree as well. And not only will it be great to engage that student and have a motivation and reason for him or her to get that degree, and it will help that individual and his or her family because there will be higher wages, and we know that those with higher wages have better health outcomes and communities are safer. But also, the state of California will have a 1 million deficit in Bachelor of Arts degrees by 2030. New jobs that are being created in the new economy requiring more and more BA degrees. In fact, 35% of California's new jobs will require one. Only 31% of Californians will have one. So this will work for everybody. Also, worked on great issues such as renewable energy and helping to encourage and now see a thriving solar industry. When we started on this 20 years ago, the California Chamber of Commerce thought it would be a job killer. Of course, the false concept being that we can't have a clean and safe environment and fight climate change and at the same time create new industries and create new jobs and have a strong economy. We did just that. In fact, today, solar industry employs more people than gas and oil combined, which is a huge accomplishment. Worked on affordable housing. At the time that the governor was closing down redevelopment agencies across the state of California, and keep in mind, we had a steady stream of state funds for building affordable housing through redevelopment. At that time, I was able to convince Governor Brown that we had enforceable obligations on 3,300 units of affordable housing at Mission Bay, Trans Bay, and Hunters Point Shipyard, and that they had to go forward. And so I accessed $500 million from the state to expedite the construction of 3,300 affordable housing units here in San Francisco at those 3 site projects. So, education, of course, affordable housing, all of these great issues. But now I'm in San Francisco here today to tell you I'm a candidate for mayor. And I'm a candidate for mayor because I believe that it is time for a new direction at City Hall. That it is time for fundamental change, that the status quo is not working, and that our crises of homelessness and housing affordability and availability, the increase in property crime, car break-ins, home break-ins, and the mess in our streets, they're all out of control. And we need new leadership and a new direction, and that is why I'm running for mayor. I want to make sure that we keep the quality and character of our neighborhoods and our business districts, that we sustain small businesses here in San Francisco. As a small business owner all of these decades, I'm well aware of the many challenges that the city puts before small business owners, and that we cannot risk losing our small businesses and our merchant districts. And we know that there is a greater phenomenon of people shopping online. I'm sure no one here does that. But if we do make use of that convenience of shopping online, realize that there is a consequence. And the consequence is that our small businesses, our neighborhood-serving businesses, will be at risk of survival, and that we could lose entire merchant districts. So we have to be thoughtful when we make our purchasing choices, and we have to be mindful of the value of what we have. We don't want to regret it years from now and think back longingly, gosh, wish we had made different choices to sustain our communities. And I also want to make sure that San Francisco remains a place where working people can afford to live. So these are the big challenges facing San Francisco right now. I put forward a very serious and detailed plan to end street homelessness by 2020. We can do this. You can find it online at markleno.com. It makes use of identified 1,500 empty single-room occupancies in San Francisco today. SROs, and I believe that the mayor of San Francisco should not let a day go by where he or she is not in negotiations with the owners of those properties to understand what the reluctances might be, how we can work with them to make sure they will have a comfort level of leasing these spaces, to the city for formerly homeless people. We, the city, would be responsible for the necessary wraparound services, the social services, if there's a mental health crisis, if there's some issue with addiction issues, we, the city, will provide the services that won't be on the property owner and then negotiate a price. In fact, the city just signed a contract with a single-room occupancy building south of Market called the Minna-Lee. It's 50 units, and the cost for the lease plus the social services to support those formerly homeless living in those units comes to $1.2 million annually. Now, 50, of course, is a 30th of the 1,500 I'm talking about, so it's a factor of 30. 1.2 million annually times 30, that's $36 million a year. We can do that. I think the bigger challenge will be working with the property owners, but we can certainly afford that. And everywhere I go across town, the first question I'm asked is, what are you going to do about the homeless crisis? So if it is our top priority, let's put our money and our effort where our mouth is and finally deal with it. It's not working for anybody. The status quo is not working for the family that wants to go out for a walk with the kids or the dog after dinner and have to navigate around tents and Lord knows what else is on the ground. It's not working for the small business owner who needs to move a body or human waste off the front stoop just to open the door and to begin the business day. And it is certainly not working for the 3,500 unfortunate individuals who are living on our streets and making a mess of them. You know, the messy streets, as bad as they are, they're not the problem, they're the symptom of a problem. The problem is there should not be 3,500 people living on our streets, and it's been going on for far too long. This is my top goal, and I'm certain we can take care of this if we put our minds and our hearts to the task. Don't be shy, don't be shy. So, can we take some questions?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you so much, Senator, for joining us.
Yes.
So as you may know, there are thousands of Arab American-owned small businesses in San Francisco. Some of them not so small anymore, but Phil's Coffee, Buy Right, Ice Sandwiches, which are all part of the cultural and economic vitality of the city. Opening and running a small business, as you know, is no easy task. Small businesses are confronted with ridiculous rent increases when their leases expire. Trying to navigate the city's taxes and ordinances can be expensive and exhausting. Small businesses can't keep up or compete with big box chains who have the capital to invest. What will you do to secure a successful future for San Francisco small businesses?
So I do come at this from a very personal perspective. I'm well aware of the challenges facing small businesses, and I'm glad that you made the point that it's difficult for our small business and our small business community to compete with the big box. So we have put in place some local regulation and ordinances to make sure that we sustain locally owned mom and pops at the exclusion of the big box, because that makes San Francisco's merchant district so much different. You know, you can travel around the country, one of the things you see are all the same big box and chain stores, but you don't see it in San Francisco. Now, I say that also keeping in mind that we have success stories like Phil's, like Ike's, and they bump into our own restrictions, which I don't think were intended for them. Those are San Francisco success stories, and I don't think we should be necessarily limiting them. So we probably should be revisiting that big box legislation to make sure that it doesn't impede the success of our own homegrown entrepreneurs. So with regard to rents, of course, we do not have rent control for commercial properties, and I'm not suggesting that here today. But what I can tell you is that we've got a very strange situation right now, a bit of a conundrum, in fact, that the situation with our glut of ground floor retail space challenges the whole notion of supply and demand, right? When you've got less supply and great demand, prices fall. If you're selling something in your store and you can't get enough customers to buy it, what do? You keep lowering the price until customers buy it. We've got all of this ground floor retail and no one's buying it. because the price is too high and the price doesn't come down. So speaking with the presidents of different merchants associations, what I'm learning is that when the properties are owned by out-of-town pension funds and insurance companies who have these properties as investments, that the net landlords are not negotiating downward to a price where our businesses can afford them, and so they just keep them empty. And for them, it's a small write-off in multi-billion-dollar investments. Though when the landlords are local, they're more likely to negotiate. But nonetheless, we've got a lot of property owned by out-of-towners who are here to make some money. And right now, there is a fee, a modest fee, that if you, landlord, have a vacancy for more than a year, you're supposed to register with the city and pay something like $711 a year. Well, that is not an amount that's going to discourage you from keeping it empty, but there's also no enforcement mechanism in that. So the city doesn't really even know the entire inventory of vacant commercial properties, ground floor retail, and we're not collecting the $700 from all those who should be registering and they're not. We need to change that, and I would not be shy to increase that fee so it's at a level that would discourage these folks from keeping places empty. And if they do keep them empty and we collect some thousands of dollars from each one of these vacancies, then we could use that money to help subsidize entrepreneurs who want to get off the ground or increase their business size. And how about some nonprofits that are leaving for Oakland, keep our nonprofit community-based serving organizations in San Francisco with some of that fee money.
Just a follow-up question. As you know, other cities are starting to implement vacancy taxes on commercial real estate, and we're noticing actually there's a lot of empty residential units that are owned by owners that just keep them empty. Would you support a vacancy tax, or what would your approach be to solve these empty commercial and residential units in the city?
Sure. So I think of it more of a fee because we're going to use the monies collected. The definition of fee is that unlike a tax doesn't go into the general fund, it stays for the purpose to mitigate the damage that that vacancy is causing, the blight in the neighborhood. So in fact, I think it would be legally defined as a fee, and that is an important differentiation and distinction because fees can be passed in a way that taxes cannot be passed. And so yes, I support what you're referring to as a vacancy tax for commercial purposes on commercial properties. Now with regard to residential properties, I think one place we might start is with pied-à-terres. These are units that people who don't live in San Francisco buy, maybe to visit here once a month or 3 times a year. They use them just as a place to visit. But more importantly, people are buying San Francisco real estate. Remember the good old days when you bought property because you wanted to live in it? They were called homes. But now housing has become an international market commodity, and international money is buying up real estate here. Keep in mind, only 10% of San Franciscans can afford to purchase market rate housing, and only 15% of us can afford to rent market rate housing. 85–90% of us cannot afford market rates. So when we're talking about affordable or below market rate housing, we're talking about housing for almost all of us. And so one way to help fill our affordable housing fund, which the city uses to build its own 100% affordable housing projects on city-owned property, we've got to fill that fund, and one way to do it is to put a tax on those who are buying pied-à-terres, those who are buying places just as investments, but not to live here.
My question is about the Unified School District and a high concentration of Arab American families reside in the Tenderloin, Nob Hill, North Beach, and Chinatown neighborhoods. Many students have suffered from anti-Arab and Islamophobic rhetoric that has increased drastically after the election of Donald Trump as president. What would you do as mayor to ensure the safety and confidence of Arab American youth in the San Francisco Unified School District?
Excuse me, thank you. This is a very challenging issue not only for the Arab American community, but for all of our many ethnic communities throughout San Francisco. One of my great memories of the 14 years that I served in Sacramento was working with a dear friend, I think you might know his name, you may not, Basim El-Kara.
This is my brother.
He's your brother.
Yeah.
This was not a plant. I did not know that. I did not know that. You've got a great brother. And this is his mother here. So, I knew Basim. It's a real pleasure, ma'am, to meet you. And you have an extraordinary son, a real leader with dignity and respect and stature. I've learned a lot from Basim. I knew him in his capacity as head of the Council of American Islamic Relations, CAR. And he knew I was Jewish, of course, and I knew that he was the leader of the council. And we just struck up a friendship. And we found common ground, and that is respect and dignity for all people. A very simple concept. And so I was honored to attend the Ramadan fast breaks and all of the many holidays throughout the year. And he would hold them often at the Capitol building, and legislators would be invited. Not a lot of my colleagues would come, but I would not miss an opportunity. It just seemed beneficial for me, and I learned a lot by meeting the community. So, to answer your question, that's how we can improve relations among all of our communities. And sometimes the discourse can get very unpleasant, and sometimes it even becomes violent. We know that there is bullying going on in our schools, and there are students of wide varieties who don't feel safe. And that's a real threat to every student's ability to be able to focus on the academics and be able to succeed in what is a God-given right to a public education. And so we've got to do everything we can, and a lot of it is just through education. And I don't think we do enough, and that's why I authored the Fair Education Act in Sacramento, the Fair, Accurate, Inclusive, and Respectful Education Act, so we can better inform students from a young age of the broad and beautiful diversity of human creation. And when we teach students from an early age about our common humanity, and to respect the differences and to celebrate our diversity, not to just tolerate, but to celebrate our diversity, that's how we begin to build bridges. It takes time, it takes effort, and it takes some heart and soul. But I know from Basim and other leaders that there are folks who can join hands and make this happen. So I remain confident.
Thank you. And so we're going to actually leave the last question to the floor. You guys seem like a good crowd. You can trust you guys to ask questions. So just please leave it to a question, not a comment. For this
My name is Father Nifon Weiss. Okay. I own a large cap company in the city, which is I left to be in the priesthood, and my son runs the company. We run probably about 35 to 40% of the taxi in the industry. And we suffer in the industry in San Francisco because the other question was like, 25% of the traffic in the city is like 70% of it is for Uber and Lyft. So what we're going to do, we have to, the taxi driver has to have license, has to obey by law of the city. We are regulated, and Uber and Lyft are not regulated at all. And there are people, they come from outside the city, from 4 hours driving away, from Sacramento, Fresno, Bakersfield, Monterey, Napa, and they come drive on the weekend and they go home. The city doesn't get benefit anything from them. Okay, they take the business away from them. What you're gonna be able to do to help the taxi industry, the transportation industry, to compete with Uber and Lyft?
Thank you, Father, for a question that I know interests everybody here and concerns me greatly. And just as I said earlier, we've got to be thoughtful when we make our online purchases that there is a downside ramification to those decisions. There's also a downside when we decide to jump in an Uber or Lyft instead of a taxi. And so Flywheel is a good app, and believe we need to change the state law so that the California Public Utilities Commission no longer regulates Uber, Lyft, and the other transportation network companies, but that we can regulate them here in San Francisco like we regulate taxis and limousines. It should be San Francisco, not Sacramento, that makes determinations on the streets of San Francisco. That's a must. And that will be a serious challenge. But in the meantime, what can we do until we change the state law? Currently, we are able to restrict the use of private vehicles on certain streets. We can do that. And we have restricted private vehicles on certain stretches of Market Street. Taxis and buses are excluded. I think we should be looking at where else we might be able to restrict. That makes good traffic pattern sense, but also then would restrict the Ubers and Lyfts without impacting the taxis. That now needs to be done very thoughtfully and with consideration of all traffic patterns and such. But it's one thing that we are able to do if we decide to do it. There's also something called geofencing, so that Uber and Lyft should not be able to use our bicycle lanes or our curbs for their own purpose. That if you use the app, it directs you around the corner, so it's not on Valencia Street, it's blocking a bike path that you would stop to get picked up. You have to walk a few feet around the block so you don't disrupt traffic. But I'm very concerned that we've already seriously damaged an industry. Everyone needs to play by the same rules and obey the same laws, and everyone needs to pay their fair share. And I don't believe that is happening right now with the TNCs. And I've got a lot of friends who drive taxis, and I'm not against innovation, hardly. I'm not against creativity and new industries. That's all well and good. But again, everyone plays by the same rules. Everyone's insured the same way. Everyone has to test their drivers the same way and register and regulate their drivers the same way. And that's not the case right now. And I think that's wrong.
Thank you so much, Senator. Thank you so much, Senator. We do have Supervisor Jane Kim here, and like I said, there's plenty of space. So, without further ado, we'll have the transition. There are a couple of seats up front if anyone would like to see.
I am also one of the candidates for mayor. My name is Amy Farah Weiss, and Farah, as many of you know, is Arabic for joy. And so I'm trying to bring some of that joy into San Francisco in the work that we do to heal and stabilize our systems and our neighborhoods and neighbors in crisis. I have about 20 years of experience working from direct service in programs that are aimed at healing and supporting, all the way up to evaluating programs, creating them, and strategizing about how to actually address some of these key issues that are happening now. One thing that really separates me from other candidates is that I'm the only one who is saying that we don't need additional SFPD officers right now. I think that London Breed actually said that she's calling for 200 additional police officers, and I don't think that's going to make a difference in terms of safety on our streets. I think what's going to make a difference is if we take that number of 200 police officers, it equals $34 million.
Yes.
We can invest that $34 million into the 100 sites that have the top crime and safety issues throughout the city. We can invest in healing at the root. Another way that makes me different from the other candidates is I've been working in encampments with encampment residents and impacted neighborhoods over the last 2.5 years through my organization, the St. Francis Homelessness Challenge. Ooh, I gotta say something about St. Francis. St. Francis and the Sultan of Egypt started one of the first interfaith movements of healing. And that's what Francis of Assisi in San Francisco should be known for, is that interfaith healing and approach. Because Francis of Assisi said, I'm gonna just go out and try to stop the Crusades. I mean, that's an impossible task, right? But a lot of people say that healing our encampment crisis is impossible, and it is not. If we had an earthquake tomorrow, what would we do? One of the things we'd do is create transitional villages for, let's say 3,000 people got displaced. Guess what? There are 3,000 people living on our streets right now in crisis conditions. We have the opportunity to take the $30 million, get that in your head, $30 million currently being spent on SFPD and DPW to move along our homeless residents. We could invest that $30 million into a plan that I have developed and piloted to get 3,000 people out of crisis conditions into safe, organized spaces. And the thing is that no matter who becomes mayor, I want to do this work. The only reason I'm running for mayor truly this time around is because I've tried to work with all the major candidates over the last 2.5 years on this issue. And sometimes you're backed into a corner where you have to say, do I want to fight for this or do I want to get in line behind somebody who hasn't actually been pushing this? But my philosophy is critique when necessary, give credit where it's due, and always work together for the greater good. And so I'm different than most politicians or candidates because I'm going to come in and be able to say, well, here's how I see it. I'm going to talk and speak my mind, tell people like where they've done something good, but then also be willing to critique, even if it's quote unquote my side. I use critical thinking. So thank you very much. I'm going to pass out some cards. I'm supporting a Vote 1-2 Equity slate of myself, Jane Kim, and Mark Leno, because you have 3 choices. So vote 1, 2, 3 for equity. Amy Farrah Weiss, weissformayor.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Without further ado, we have Supervisor Jane Kim here. Thank you.
Of course, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And first of all, I just want to welcome our newest chartered Democratic Club to San Francisco. Congratulations. I have really long appreciated this community, what you do to contribute to San Francisco's local economy, but also in our civil rights movement. And finally, I just want to thank you for supporting me since I first ran for the San Francisco Board of Supervisors in 2010. I truly appreciate and have been grateful for your support and hope that I have been a good ally over the last 8 years. I have now served close to 12 years in public service here for the City and County of San Francisco. I started out on the Board of Education, and now I serve on the Board of Supervisors representing the Tenderloin, South Market, Mission Bay, and Treasure Island. And many of you have businesses in my district or worship in my district. In 2012, I was proud to be the lead author of Safe San Francisco Ordinance, an initiative that I worked on with you to bring to light SFPD's secret work in partnership with the Joint Terrorism Task Force, surveying our Arab, Muslim, and South Asian American communities without any probable cause, which to me is un-American, and targeting via race and religion communities that were innocent regardless of any of their actions. And that, you know, I used to serve as an attorney at Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. We are not the United States of America if you do not protect the fundamental civil rights of every single individual that lives in our country. And your role, again, in fighting for our civil rights is a fight not just for the Arab American community or the Muslim community, it is a fight for all Americans. Because we know that these fights come back over and over again. And as President Trump calls for a Muslim registry, we must remember that in 1890, the Congress actually passed a racial registry on Chinese and Chinese Americans with the Second Chinese Exclusion Act. And it was actually here in San Francisco that the 6 companies and Chinese American leaders did the first civil disobedience and actually asked all of the Chinese American citizens to refuse to register the first racial registry here in this country. So history continues to repeat itself. So as we fight for our rights in our communities, we are truly fighting for the rights of all Americans in the past and into the future. And so this work is important for all of us. Many of you also are small business owners in our community, and I know the work that you do 7 days a week, in and out, providing services and amenities, often in our lowest income neighborhoods. I represent the Tenderloin in South of Market, as you know, and my mom also started out as a small business owner. She ran a store, and I used to live in that store. For those of you that have little children, I spent much of my afternoons, my summers, in her little storage room in the back, where I used to drive my mother crazy. But she really had nowhere else to put me unless one of her friends would pick me up and take me to hang out with them. And so I really understand growing up in an immigrant community and watching my parents fight to purchase their first home, to send me to the best schools. But I'm so lucky that I had such a strong family. I was eventually able to attend Stanford University and UC Berkeley School of Law. It is my family's faith and hard work, but also their determination to give me the best opportunities possible, which I know that you fight for every single day for your families as well. So, just very, very briefly, over the last 2 terms on the board, I'm proud to have made San Francisco the only city in the country to make community college free for all of our residents. I'm proud to have negotiated and won more affordable and middle-income housing for our residents here in San Francisco, and I'm proud to have authored legislation to strengthen protections for our most vulnerable tenants, in particular seniors and immigrants who speak English as a second language, who are disproportionately targeted for unfair evictions here in San Francisco. So at this time, I thought I would open up for a Q&A. Shahid?
You covered a lot.
Oh, I covered a lot of it. Okay, great.
So maybe do we want to take some questions from the audience? Some of you had shown interest in asking some questions, or I'm happy to facilitate a conversation.
So as part of the board of supervisors, so what did you do regarding homelessness and drugs, and what's your plan, for as a potential future mayor?
Yeah, so
I think this is like number one, I think,
I
issue.
agree.
And what did you do, as part of the board of supervisors?
Yeah. So I do think homelessness is one of the top 3, if not number 1 issue that I hear about from residents and small business owners here in San Francisco. I think it's important for me to just go back and explain a little bit of the history in terms of how homelessness began in this country in the 1980s. We in the country used to be in the business of building housing. And during the mid-20th century, HUD's budget was larger than the Department of Defense. And between 1940 and 1980, the federal government built close to 6,000 units of publicly subsidized working class and middle class housing here just in San Francisco alone. In 1980, when President Reagan won, he ran under the platform of smaller government. Government should do less and the market should do more. Which sounded nice at the time. And one of the things that he did, besides passing the most sweeping tax cuts on the richest individuals and corporations, is how he funded it was by slashing HUD's funding. And over 3 presidential administrations, we slashed HUD's funding by 50%. And over the next 40 years, 1980 till now, federal government has only built 1,000 units of publicly subsidized housing in San Francisco. In the 1980s, when Reagan started slashing HUD, homelessness emerged as a crisis in cities across the country because the market cannot house the poor and the working class and now the middle class because it does not pencil out. No developer will ever build housing for low-income folks because it does not pencil out without a subsidy. Now, when government built housing, we built it with a subsidy, understanding that not everyone can afford the cost of a home to rent or to own, given how expensive it is to build and the cost of land, etc. I think housing is a very different type of good than what we buy at a store. It is our well-being, our safety, our ability to work and raise a family, and this is an arena that government should be heavily engaged in. So when people say housing is a solution to homelessness, it is. Now, let's come back to San Francisco 40 years later. There's roughly about 20,000 individuals that interface with San Francisco's homeless support services system on any given year. We talk a lot about the 7,000, That is the number of people we roughly count on any given night that sleeps on the streets of San Francisco or sleeps in our shelter, which means not everyone who is homeless sleeps on our streets every single night. The fastest growing segment of our homeless count, but I will never get emails complaining about this, are families. It's single mothers with children and jobs. That's not only the case in San Francisco, it's a case in New York and LA as well. We cannot house people that work. That is a huge problem. You don't see them. They're often sleeping in cars, couch surfing, on the streets some nights, not on the streets other nights. The vast overwhelming majority of homelessness, we need to house and provide rent subsidies. We need to greatly expand our rent subsidy program and of course build more affordable housing and strengthen tenant protections. Now the folks that you are often talking about, the roughly 3,000 to 4,000 people who are chronically homeless that sleep on the streets almost every single night. They usually also are struggling with mental health illness and also substance abuse. We call them triple diagnosis. This population is very difficult actually to serve and to house. We must deal with this issue. I believe that San Francisco can address at least 50% of street homelessness. I think that we can build 1,500 shelter beds. And something I did on my time on the Board of Supervisors, I actually stayed in one of our shelters because I wanted to know what that experience is like. I'm the only elected official to have done that. And what I learned that night is that shelter was made for someone like me, young, able-bodied, down on my luck. That is not who is coming into our shelters. I was actually shocked. People are far older and far sicker than I'd realized. I saw many people that looked like my grandmother in our shelter. And so a couple of things. I fought and I got full-time nurses in all of our shelters. They now exist. And my last project with Mayor Ed Lee, he granted our office $6.6 million to build a 24-hour medical shelter in my district, staffed by nurses, clinicians, and psychologists. We just cut the ribbon in December. I want to greatly expand this program. We have to treat street homelessness as a public health crisis. It is not just a poverty crisis. It is also a public health crisis, but we need to treat people. People will not end up in permanent stable housing without mental health support. But it is a huge issue and an issue that I really want to take on as mayor of the city. And finally, on street cleaning, I want to double the number of street cleaners. We have 285 street cleaners here in San Francisco. The city of Hong Kong, by the way, 7 times larger than San Francisco, has 9,700 street cleaners. So we can double the number of street cleaners in San Francisco, and we can hire individuals who live on the streets that want to work. And it's an entry-level job into city job, which is a middle-class job with benefits, and we can help people climb out of poverty. Yes, or I don't know. Sorry, Shahid.
I have a question.
By the Agricultural Community Center today, and the organization has been petitioning the city for some time for a remnant city property to help build a center for housing for our elders. How are you willing to help?
So I often work in my district on identifying parcels that we can build affordable housing for seniors and families, formerly homeless, as well as middle-income families as well. And so I would love to work with the Arab American community on sites that they've identified to build affordable housing on.
I have a follow-up.
Okay. There's an.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question. Many of those in jail in SF have been homeless or have mental illness needs. What will you do to make sure that the city and the county money isn't put into a new jail or policing?
So I've also visited our county jails, and it is very clear that we now use our jails as our solution, our very easy solution to address homelessness, poverty, mental health, and substance abuse. And in fact, I visited the ward where we put very sick people into, and it is one of the saddest things I've ever seen. It is incredibly traumatizing for sick people to be in jail, and it is the last place we should be putting them in. I led the fight with Supervisor David Campos against the jail rebuild here in San Francisco. And when we first voted on filling out the application to build a new jail, the vote was 9-2, with only Supervisor David Campos and myself in the dissent. A year and a half later, thanks to the work of the No Jail Rebuild Coalition, when we finally won the $80 million grant from the state, we won 8 votes on the Board of Supervisors to reject this $80 million grant. And that was thanks to the organizing of our community. No thanks, I just participated in that process. And we spent time over that year and a half educating people that what we need is not a new jail. We need a substance abuse treatment center. We need more mental health services. We need to build affordable housing. That is a more difficult answer to the problems that we're facing in society. Jails are much easier, by the way. It's why politicians love them. It's a very simple solution to addressing very complex issues where society has failed, but it is not ultimately the true answer. And so I remain committed to that. We have a declining jail population thanks to a very progressive sheriff's and adult probation department. We need to continue the work to keep people out of our jails, and we need to be treating people that really need that support. Hi, Sonia's brother.
Hello, how are you? So we're 2 blocks away from the Forest Hills affordable housing proposal that recently was killed, was abandoned. And I appreciate what you said about building more affordable housing and more housing for formerly homeless people. What would you do to keep something like that from happening again?
Well, we haven't had that issue in the district that I represent. And in fact, we also have had neighborhood opposition to building both affordable housing and housing for the formerly homeless. I know you've gone to some of those meetings in Mission Bay and other parts of my district. I've always stood firm with our constituents that we have to do our part in building for everybody. And honestly, it's just leadership. You have to say that this is the right thing for the larger city as a whole. And I think that every neighborhood should accept affordable housing and housing for the formerly homeless. In fact, honestly, I say this all the time, this work is not altruistic, it is very selfish. We are better off when there are less people who sleep on the streets. You are safer when we build more affordable housing. And so we should not look at it as something as, impending doom for a neighborhood. It's actually better for our neighborhood if we house people and get them off the streets instead of letting them stay there. The gentleman over there had a question.
Yes. I would like to ask about what would you do about the teaching system in San Francisco? Because I've heard a lot of teachers in San Francisco are leaving San Francisco because they cannot afford it.
Cannot afford it.
And what would be done about it?
Yeah.
What can you do about it?
So the school district is a separate jurisdiction, just so you know. I served on the school board. It is its own entity. That being said, while we don't have policy jurisdiction at the city and county, we can provide resources and revenue to our schools, which is what we already do. Now, I talked a lot about how we have divested from building housing, affordable housing. We have also divested from public education. In 1978, voters passed Proposition 13, after which we lost almost a third of all public school funding in the state of California. We used to be in the top 5 in the country in per capita spending. We're now, we're not anymore at the bottom 5. But we're, what?
We're at 46.
I thought we went up a little after Proposition 30. No? Okay, so Jeremiah Jeffries, who is a first grade teacher at Reading Elementary School, many of you know him. Thank you, Jeremiah. We're now at the bottom 5. I thought we went up a little bit with Proposition 30, but I guess not. Which means we spend as much as the South does on public education. We are this is not a downer on the South, but the South is not the 5th largest economy in the world. They are very poor states. The state of California is the 5th largest economy, not in this country, but in the world. And how we fund public education is a travesty. And we are experiencing a crisis where teachers can no longer afford to live here. And so part of the work, of course, is to build more middle-income housing, to build educator housing, which we're doing in the Sunset, in Supervisor Katie Tang's district. And we have to raise the wages of our teachers. Proposition G is on the ballot. I hope you'll all support it. The other thing that I want to do to support teachers is that teachers do a lot. They're completely overwhelmed. They're not just teachers, they're nurses, they're social workers, they're counselors, because our kids come in with so much need into the classroom. And the one thing that the city can do is partner with our schools so they can become community hubs, so that families and children can get additional services. They can get mental health support, nursing, wellness clinics. That is the way that the city can partner with our schools. And by the way, we already do. I'm the author of the Public Education Enrichment Fund authorization. Supervisor Tom Amiono actually began it. It now brings $73 million into our public school system, and we must continue to invest in our schools because those are our families and our children.
Just to follow up on that.
Okay.
So actually, I think the highest concentration of Arab American students live in your district.
Yes.
And many of them have suffered from anti-Arab and Islamophobic rhetoric, especially which is an increase after the election of Donald Trump. So what will you do as mayor to ensure their safety? And also, to give just some retrospect information, a few years ago there was racist bus ads that a lot of Arab American youth actually felt unsafe riding on Muni due to these ads. And just to lumping all that together, again, how would you ensure their safety?
So we have to have a zero tolerance for hate in this city. We are a sanctuary city, and by the way, sanctuary doesn't just mean for, in regards to your documentation, it means in every single way. And what I would want to do is to support our teachers and our schools in making sure that we are building safe environments, that we are working on anti-bullying strategies and training our educators. We have a lot of work to do, and I think what we are seeing post-Trump is this general allowance of violence and harassment against particular communities as the source of all of our country's problems. That involves a lot of education, and I would want to work also with the community on devising solutions because I don't always have the answer to everything, but I am smart enough to work with people on figuring out solutions to how we can make it a stronger community. So listening to the parents, the teachers, what can we do at City Hall to support our community so they feel safe going to school, such a basic thing.
John?
Supervisor Smith, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
When there's economic vitality and recovery, you expect quality of life to also improve in your city. Unfortunately, a lot of the construction that's happening and a lot of the infrastructure that's aging is not improving. What would you do as the new leader of the city to change that trajectory?
Well, the construction is going to continue, and that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. It is a growing pain. Our city grew 100,000 residents in the last decade, and we do have to continue building more and also building the infrastructure in order for us to keep pace. But you're right, we were not keeping pace previously, which is why we're in the situation that we are today. I think that one of the things that I'm very concerned about is not the construction in and of itself. I'm concerned about the construction's impact on small businesses. I get it. The margins are very slim in small businesses, so the profit you make are this much. So when you have a down month, it's not like you have a lot of financing to keep you going for a year and a half or 2 years or 3 years. And what we're finding is that really long construction projects, especially ones with delays, are hurting small businesses. I have put together last July, due to complaints I've heard from small businesses, a construction mitigation fund for small businesses. So businesses that are impacted by delayed construction and construction projects, public projects, would get additional funding to be able to stay in place so that when the central subway or whatever great infrastructure project that we're building that's finally done, you're able to make it to be able to enjoy the benefits of that new housing, new infrastructure. There are two people there's three people in the back. I don't remember.
With the tie.
Hi, guy with the tie.
My name is Chris Weiss. I'm the CEO of Yellow Cab here in San Francisco.
Oh yes, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Yes, we got to buy back the medallions.
Well, that's another question. That's certainly one topic. Yeah.
We have failed the taxi cab industry, and I'm incredibly sorry about our role in not protecting an industry that we regulate and started.
And many drivers really would appreciate that sentiment. When TNCs first started several years ago, San Francisco was obviously the city they started in. The city didn't want to regulate them, so the regulation moved to the PUC. Now, 25% of the vehicle miles traveled in San Francisco are done by TNCs. 70% of the congestion-related traffic citations that the SFPD gives out are given to TNCs. Do you feel they should be locally regulated? And
yes.
Then, okay, great. So,
but it's not that we didn't want to regulate them. I need to correct that. The California State Constitution explicitly states that all other transportation vehicles outside of taxi cabs are regulated by the state of California. It's a relic of the days that the PUC used to regulate the railroads, and it's very unfortunate.
I believe there was a conversation between the PUC and the city about regulation because they were a brand new business. But I don't want to.
We went to court, and we legally cannot regulate them.
Well, I don't want to dwell on what happened in the past too much, but since you feel that they should be regulated locally, what kind of steps are you willing to do to get that to happen? As difficult as it may be, whether it's legal or legislative or any other.
I've tried several, and I can tell you all the ones that have already failed.
Yeah.
I've tried to introduce a per-fee ride,
Right.
like was passed in the state of Massachusetts, and Philadelphia, and Chicago. We're not allowed to do that. I'd like to cap the number of TNCs in San Francisco. Cannot do that. We tried to require business license of TNC drivers that drive in San Francisco. Cannot do that via a state bill that passed last year at the state legislature. And I believe that they should have the same requirements that taxi cab drivers have: driver ed, background checks. We want to make sure our passengers are safe when they're riding in TNCs. And the classic jazz music in the background. Supervisor Eric Huskin has introduced a gross receipts measure on TNCs. I'm the second co-author of that. We can tax industries as a general tax, and so that is something that we're looking forward to. I'd love to have some local controls around TNCs, but we are limited via our California state constitution, unfortunately.
Question there?
Yeah. My question deals with, there's been some talk about policing, and we, the candidate here, talked about the city didn't need 200 more police officers. Ever since the brutal beating of Rodney King in the mid-1990s, there's been a national spotlight on police violence.
1991, yes.
1991. There's been settlements throughout the Bay Area of hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars to families like with Petey Perez in Richmond, or with the Diana Showman in San Jose, but there's almost never prosecutions. And I know the DA is the one that decides whether to prosecute a police officer who shoots and killed unarmed, or if armed in a way that couldn't pose a real threat. It's been 2.5 years since the shooting of Mario Woods, and there's been no prosecution of any sort. And so as a mayor, would you use your bully pulpit to at least advocate for the prosecution? Because Gascon hasn't prosecuted cops for almost nothing at all. He gives them a blank check to do what they want. And so what would your attitude be towards the shooting of Mario Woods, and what would you do as a mayor to try to at least pressure the DA to take action?
I don't want to go into the specifics of an incident because, there's a lot of details that I think we would have to go through on a legal basis to go through that. But this is what I'll say. The mayor of the city is responsible as an executive for one of their agencies, which includes San Francisco Police Department. And we must be 100% committed to implementing the reforms of the Department of Justice. And by the way, the police department has an additional layer of accountability or level of accountability because they are tasked in keeping us safe, and they get weapons as tools to protect our safety. We don't live in a city where everyone feels safer when a police officer is walking down the street. I feel very privileged to live in a city where I feel safer when I see a police officer, but I know that that is not the experience of every San Francisco resident. That has to change. San Francisco PD must be a department for everybody in San Francisco. The thing that I think is important, though, is the broader, more comprehensive picture, which is what does it ultimately mean to make San Francisco a safer city for all of us? Yes, SFPD is a part of that strategy, but we also have to invest in education. We have to invest in housing. We have to invest in the very things that actually truly make a city safer. Again, I said that jails were an easy solution to a lot of societal ills, and I think that police can be, in some ways, a very easy answer as well. It's not to say they should not exist, because they certainly play a role, but they should be held accountable. They have access to very heavy-handed tools for us to utilize for our public safety, and we have to ensure that it's done with accountability, and that takes leadership from the top.
All right.
I think that lady in the back had her hand. Michael knows me so well. He sees me every single day. So Michael, I'm going to go to other folks that don't see me on a daily basis, because I know you can ask me the question right after I leave or tomorrow when I see you, if that's okay. So the two ladies.
What do you think about tax breaks for the tech companies?
I was the author of the mid-market tax exclusion in 2011, which authorized a payroll tax exclusion for companies that moved to mid-market. When I came onto the board in 2011, we were at the depth of the recession, and it was jobs, not housing, that was the #1 issue for our constituents. I I have very mixed feelings about tax breaks because I think everyone should enjoy paying their taxes. It goes to our roads, our schools, our police, our parks, all these good things. That being said, we had a company that was threatening to leave, and I represented a corridor, mid-market, that had the highest commercial vacancy rate in the city, 30%. And so Twitter said, and whether it's true or not, I can never tell you, but they said they would leave if we did not give them some type of break to come to mid-market. So I worked with them. By the way, the bill already had 6 votes, so I was the 7th. It was in my district. I decided I wanted to shape the ordinance. And so we did a couple of things. One, we limited the number of years because they wanted a complete tax break for many, many years. And they didn't want to pay any taxes. And I said, no way. But we'll give you a break on any net new jobs you create in this corridor. And we included all the small businesses in the area as well. They were also eligible for this tax exclusion too. Second, we only allowed you to get the break if you moved into a building that had a commercial history of vacancy. So Twitter moved into a building that had been vacant for 50 plus years. Now, Uber and Square moved in next door to 1455 Market that had not been historically vacant. So they were paying all of their taxes. They were not eligible for the break. It is not perfect legislation, and once you enter the world of politics, you work in a lot of gray areas and a lot of compromise. And I did the best job that I thought as a representative for our city to help us economically revitalize an area, but with as much balance as possible. It was not perfect, and I certainly followed up afterwards to make sure that we were funding arts and nonprofits that were getting pushed by the increased rents in the area, and also making sure that we were strengthening tenant protections for residents that were getting pushed by this economic growth. Someone had asked about earlier, you had asked about, our city has grown economically in a way that makes other cities envy us. But the problem is that wealth was not distributed evenly. We have the fastest growing income gap between the rich and the poor in the country, according to the Brookings Institute. And we have a shrinking middle class. So in 1990, in San Francisco, the middle class made up close to 50% of San Francisco's population. And we define the middle class as households that make between $50,000 and $150,000 a year. That is a lot of people. Made up close to 50% of our population. As of 2012, the last year I have the data point, it dropped to 33%. And my guess is that even in the last 5 years, it's dipped below 30%. I think the biggest question facing San Francisco today is who gets to live here? Who gets to live in this great city? And it is great to be in a progressive city where we've made community college free, where we've instituted sanctuary city, where we fight against, the JTTF work. But it doesn't matter if you can't afford to live here, right? And so we have to make sure that the city continues to be a city of all of us. And part of how we do it is by funding 4 things that I think are basic institutions that governments are responsible for, that the public sector should take ownership for. Housing, public education, public transportation, and healthcare. We need to provide people with a basic foundation to have a fighting chance to get into the middle class. Yes, last question.
Yeah. The Arab American community is a large community of the city.
Yes.
Whether we live there or we own businesses and very successful businesses, but through the years we were underrepresented.
Yes.
And what would you do as a mayor to appoint more commissioners to important commissions at the city?
Thank you for asking that question. I am very proud of my work in ensuring, or actually getting Miriam Zazunas appointed to the Small Business Commission, and I know she's here today. Our office recruited her, and we helped get her a role. The Arab American Small Business Community is such an essential part of our San Francisco city. It's so important to have a representative, and it's so great to have a young woman who's rising in leadership, and I hope she runs for office one day, so please support her. Oh, there she is. I'm surprised you didn't hide when I said that. That's good. That's good. And I will continue to do that. I think that it is important for us to have representation at every single level. And by the way, even in my office, it's great to elect more women, but we need more women at every single level. I hired an all-female legislative staff, all women of color, in fact, all mothers for many years. Bobby Lopez, my legislative director, is in the back. And many of you know her because she works with our small business community. And I'm going to be committed to continue to do that as mayor in my staff hirings and department head hirings and our commission seats. I want to make sure that we are representative of San Francisco and that all of our voices are at the table and we craft important policies that impact all of us. I think I have time actually. Oh no, I don't have time. It's 5:35. So I think you have another candidate coming.
Yes.
I will just say this. Thank you again for having me. Congratulations to the chartering of our newest Democratic Club. I would love to earn your vote. We have 24 days till Election Day, and I hope over the next 24 days I'm able to earn hopefully your #1 vote, but if not your #1 vote, I'd love to get one of your votes. But please do vote regardless of who you decide to vote for. It is such an important part of our democracy that we stay engaged, but also, and I know this having worked in Chinatown and in the Asian American community, the more our communities vote, the more powerful we become in policy decisions and budgetary discussions. The more we come to you and we have platforms dedicated and aligned with what your community needs are. I'm so excited for this new Democratic Club, and I really look forward to our continued work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Supervisor. So we do have one more candidate. We have Supervisor London Breed.
Medium or large? Oh, I'll take the medium. Okay. Can I?
You can come closer, guys. There's room.
Hi, Supervisor.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Mike is all yours.
Thank you, everybody, for your patience. I'm London Breed. I'm president of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, and I'm running for mayor in San Francisco. Yes. I was born and raised in San Francisco. My grandmother raised me in the Fillmore neighborhood and public housing there, and during the time that I was growing up in this neighborhood, I thought that what I saw all around me was normal. The violence, the hopelessness, the drugs, the despair. And I was really lucky because I ended up going to school, getting my education, finishing in college, but I was still really frustrated because of the violence and what was happening in my neighborhood. My whole life has been dedicated to changing and saving lives in the Western Addition community. I came back, I was running the African American Art and Culture Complex. I made sure that we had tutors for our kids, that we paid our kids. I mean, we really forced them to be actively engaged in positive activities, but more importantly, I wanted to make sure that their normal was changed by exposure to incredible opportunities that exist right here in San Francisco in their backyard. I've served on the Redevelopment Agency Commission, I've served on the Fire Commission, I've worked for the Treasure Island Development Authority and doing great things in San Francisco over the years. And that is not what got me here. What got me here is my passion and my commitment to making sure that even though I was able to make it out of a challenging environment, that we make sure that in San Francisco, that we make better policies, that we make better decisions about how we spend money and how we work with communities for the purposes of leaving no one behind. So I ran in 2012. I was surprised I won, but I did. And here I am. I've been on the Board of Supervisors, pushing forward really challenging kinds of policies. I mean, Clean Power SF, the single most important thing we could do to combat climate change. After 12 years of fighting and divisiveness and stalling, I helped usher that through. I grew up in public housing. So one of the first things I did was to talk to the public San Francisco Housing Authority about how many empty units they had that were available that we could rehab. We discovered there were 179 empty units. And so I got the mayor to give us $2 million to the San Francisco Housing Authority. We rehab 179 units of formerly empty public housing units that was empty for years, and we placed 179 formerly homeless families in those units. Being on the Board of Supervisors, being a leader in San Francisco is not always about passing policy or talking about things that sound good. It's actually about making good decisions so that it impacts people in a positive way. And so I'm running for mayor because I have a different vision for San Francisco, one that leaves no one behind, addressing our issues around homelessness, public safety, housing, all the things that we talk about. But sadly, everyone is talking about it, but not talking about creative solutions to address these issues. I'm proposing reforming our mental health system because you see on our streets that people who are suffering from mental illness, they're suffering from addiction, and just because we don't want to see it doesn't mean that it's just going to go away. We got to get innovative with how we address those issues. So I'm proposing changes to our mental health system and not treat it like a criminal issue, but treat it like the public health crisis that it is. I'm proposing safe injection sites, not for the convenience of making sure that people who have addiction have a safe place to use, but more importantly, that they have treatment on demand. They have a possibility of getting better. I'm proposing that we build more housing, and we build more housing faster in San Francisco, that we identify underutilized sites that exist all over the city for the purposes of building housing. In fact, I approached the owners of McDonald's on Haight and Stanton right down the street. First they told us no, that they wouldn't work with us to do something with that underutilized empty parking lot. And then a few years later, they came to us and said, not only will we sell it to you, we'll sell it to you for below market rate. The city purchased it. We're going to build affordable housing for low, moderate, and middle income residents in the Haight-Ashbury community. Those are the kinds of things that we need to be doing in order to move San Francisco forward. I'm committed to making sure that we change how we do business. Between 2010 and 2015, for every 8 jobs we created 1 unit of housing. And we wonder what's going on in San Francisco. A mayor is responsible for all its citizens, for providing the kind of vision that's going to make sure we're working on each and every one of these issues simultaneously. Housing, public safety, homelessness, providing services, and also accountability for the funding that we issue for those services, making sure that those monies are going to address the challenges that exist here, that there's some level of accountability. Getting there won't be easy. Making the hard decisions and being mayor of a place like San Francisco clearly is not going to be easy. But I'm not going to do this job alone. I'm going to do this job with everyday San Franciscans, people who are going to continue to serve and work with me on commissions, on boards, on my staff, to help us address these issues. Getting people involved in the city who are just as passionate as I am at changing the city for the better and focusing on these issues that matter the most. So I am just here to say, I hope you'll consider supporting me. I can't wait until this race is over. June 5th is the last day, and I know you all have a lot of questions, and I want to open it up to questions, but you know, no matter what happens in this race, I'm still going to be actively engaged in this city. And I want to see more people actively engaged. The only way that we're going to make sure that no one is left behind is that each of us takes a role in getting involved. I got involved because I didn't want to see what was normal for me continue to be normal for the next generation. It's one of the reasons why I'm proposing an education platform, one in which all of our kids, especially in our public schools, have a paid internship when they're in high school and hopefully get credit while they're in high school. Being a part of the Mayor's Youth Employment and Training Program changed my life. It put money in my pocket, it had me focused, it provided me with an open door to opportunity, because too many of the folks who I grew up with didn't end up in the same place. They ended up dead, they ended up in jail, they ended up in so many situations that I am just so blessed and grateful that I'm even standing here. And so I want to make sure that we do things differently, that we provide a real open door to opportunity in San Francisco. That's what this is all about for me, is connecting the dots, being a mayor for all San Franciscans, rolling up my sleeves and getting the work, and I'd be honored to have your support. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Bree. It's always great to see a fellow San Francisco native in the building. We're gonna open it up for questions, but before that, I have a few questions, if you don't mind. So as you know, San Francisco Police Department pulled out of the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force amid controversy over this Trump administration's travel ban and concerns that participation in the task force might violate local laws protecting immigrants and religious minorities. However, current and former law enforcement officials said that this could weaken efforts to detect and stop terrorist plots in the Bay Area. Do you support the SFPD pulling out of the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force? Yes or no, and why?
So when I was acting mayor, that was at the time where the police department decided to pull out of the terrorist task force, mostly because we were very concerned about racial profiling that was occurring during that time, and so I respected the chief's decision to actually do that. But I also dealt with a situation where there was a terrorist attack on Pier 39, some of you might have remembered. And so the coordination, the work, and the information that we needed to help make sure that that didn't occur involved coordination. It involved working together. What I plan to do as mayor is keep our city safe. But what I will not stand for with any law enforcement is racial profiling in any community. I mean, in the African American community, you know, with local authorities, you know, it took a lot for us to actually bridge that gap and develop relationships. You know, we didn't talk to the police when I was a kid. And so when I became the executive director of the African American Art and Culture Complex, we were dealing with some of the worst violence in the history of our city. I wanted our kids to be safe. I brought the police in. I helped develop a relationship between our police officers and our kids, and I wanted them to know each other and I wanted them to respect each other. And yes, the first year it was hard. The kids would not speak to the police officers. And then the next year, maybe a little head nod here and there. The third year, it's a little fist bump. Some of these kids are grown-ups now. And they see the same officers who are fortunate enough that we still have the same officers who have watched our kids grow and know our community and have a great relationship with our community where, you know, they're giving them hugs now. And part of what I want to make sure with law enforcement of any kind is that they have a better relationship with our community, because I don't want what's been happening in the past to continue to happen in the future. And as mayor, that's what I'm committed to doing.
Let's open it up, and please keep it to questions. Brad?
Welcome you again in our home. Supervisor, I want to welcome you in our home again. And the Arab community is one of the oldest communities in the city. And this is the community has been serving the neighborhood for many years with over 700 stores all over the city. Now we dropped down to almost 500 stores for many reasons. One of them is we lose the leases because of high rents. Second, and one of the most important one, is the treatment and the taxes from the city, which every year somebody comes in with a new law and it takes away a few stores from us to a point that we are losing the business. Now we have two issues coming up in the grocers alone. One is the flavor cigarettes, which are in the ballot now, and it's not gonna kill us, but we're gonna lose probably some business. But the one that's gonna really put 90% of our businesses out of business is the filter cigarettes, non-filter cigarettes. I think you are aware of that one.
No, I know that Prop E is on the ballot right now.
That's the flavor cigarettes.
Yes.
The one I'm talking about, there is an issue coming up with the non-filter cigarettes, which that means we cannot sell any cigarettes with filter. And if that happens, that means we lose the sale of the cigarettes. The sale of the cigarettes is 20 to 25% of our sales, and if we lose the 25%, you lose the snacks, you lose the beer, you lose the other items. So I will guarantee you 80% of all the stores will go out of business if that happens. Also, the taxes. When they started the cigarette filters, they said we're going to charge you $2 for each bag, to each carton, to clean the cigarettes from the streets. So fine, we bet the $2. Now it went to $4. Now it's $7.50 to clear the cigarettes butts from the streets. And after that, they're coming back and saying it's not enough. We want to eliminate the whole thing. And instead said stop selling cigarettes with filter. Let's say try to say stop to protect the production of the filter with cigarettes. Then you will say your fight will not be with the smaller stores. The fight will be with the cigarette companies, and they are much bigger than us, and they can fight better than we do. Other issues, the city property has been used against us.
The city what?
The city properties has been used against us when the bus ads. The bus ads, they have like a political message, which is not political message, actually it's a hate message. And I think you saw it before, you saw it in many buses, and they have multi-million-dollar project they can afford to pay the city, but I don't think we can afford to compete with them. So this is an issue hopefully you will look into it. The other issue. You know, excuse me, I don't think she ever heard it. I don't, she might not hear it again, but this is my chance to express myself.
It's all love here.
Okay, she'll come in.
Now, but more someone. Now, the Arabic language, I think not the Philippine, the Vietnamese language were introduced to be taught in the schools. And some high powers, more than, much stronger than us, eliminated the Arab language, and we're having a fight with it. So hopefully, if you become a mayor, will you work on it and make sure that the Arab language is be taught in school? I have more, but he's put
Just to sum that up really quickly, I think a lot of that resonates with the overregulation of small businesses, mom and pops, and then obviously property.
Yeah. And one of the things, and hopefully some of our small business owners that I saw on the way in, like Roger and Nabil, will actually help with solutions to address some of the challenges that exist with small businesses. More specifically, you know, we don't have any control over the commercial real estate prices that sadly are really what's running a lot of our small businesses out of the city and county of San Francisco. And what I want to do as mayor, for the purposes of protecting my dry cleaners, my nail place, and all the things that I hold dear in life, is to evaluate, you know, just all the list of taxes and fees and other things that we're charging to small businesses in San Francisco, and just really look at where we can actually cut costs. What are some of the things that we have control over that we can actually get rid of for the purposes of just basically putting a little extra money in the pockets of small businesses? There is something that I'm doing right now, some of you might have heard of, is we're eliminating fines and fees in the criminal justice system for people who serve their time. Not the things that, you know, they have to pay for, maybe there's the theft or something like that, but the court fees, the ankle bracelets, the unnecessary kinds of fees that people are paying for. And what I want to do is make sure that government doesn't continue to layer bureaucracy and fees and drama on top of small businesses. And part of what I want to do is make sure that we evaluate what we can actually eliminate for the purpose of providing some relief to our small businesses. We have legacy business. If we have the money, we can provide support to businesses, but that's not going to solve the problem long term. I want to basically cut some of the red tape out of the equation, and that's something I'm proposing to do and evaluate when I become mayor of San Francisco.
Thank you for being here, Supervisor. Just to follow up and some clarifications. Fouad was referring to the cigarette litter abatement fee, which is one that has zero accountability to it.
Is that a local or is that?
That is San Francisco. $6 million a year, corner stores are paying to DPW for street cleanup of cigarette butts, and it raises every year, and the Nexus study has never been reassessed. Deemed approved off-sale use ordinance is another exclusively corner store fee that has a waiver option, but they don't tell anybody. Also, the cigarette butt is one that your office proposed before the ban on flavored tobacco came.
And then we went to talk to folks in your community and we backed off because of the concerns that were
So yeah,
raised.
that was reference to that, just clarifying.
Yeah.
So my question is, the logic of the regulatory policies coming out of City Hall right now. So recreational marijuana is legalized. You're looking at safe injection sites. However, you want to ban flavored tobacco. That's just a confusing regulatory policy to a lot of us, and we kind of want to know why you want to take a product that 96% of retailers are compliant in carting onto the black market.
So part of my concern personally has everything to do with the fact that flavored tobacco deliberately targets the next generation of tobacco users. And this is what I've seen from personal experience as someone who actually grew up in poverty and watched as these types of things would basically target my community, and how early on people would get hooked on tobacco products. And so I think part of what we're proposing has everything to do with making sure that this doesn't continue to happen to the next generation. We're probably just going to have a disagreement as it relates to tobacco and the use of tobacco. I mean, I want to make sure that the products that are not healthy for my community are not in my community, if at all possible. That's what I care about the most. And I'm not necessarily trying to take away any profits. as I said earlier, what my goal is to try and find other ways in which the city can cut back on the dollars that you all are paying, you know, for your businesses to actually do business in San Francisco. I mean, what you're talking about in terms of a clean up cigarette butt tax, I mean, I see cigarette butts all over the streets in San Francisco, and so I really don't know what it's actually doing. And so from my perspective, I want to clean up our streets. I want to make sure we're doing a better job at cleaning up the streets, but you know, I'm not sure how, like you said, what's the nexus between the fee and how it actually is supposed to accomplish a goal. It's not accomplishing the goal, clearly, and so if that's not the case, then that's something that we need to revisit. So I'm prepared to be open about, you know, other issues as far as health and trying to make sure that, and when I say my community, I'm specifically talking about, you know, the African American community and how these products continue to target my community and what I've seen in terms of cancers and other things with relatives and friends and loved ones over the years. So I'm very sensitive about trying to do what I can to rid my community of things that could be harmful. Now, this is not necessarily going to make someone or not make them use a tobacco product. You can't stop people from choosing to use drugs or use tobacco or any of these other products. We're just trying to stop this industry from specifically marketing and targeting to these communities specifically, and that's what my support is about.
Yeah, and just to be clear, we're not arguing about the health access and the abatement. That's not the disagreement. We're simply asking the mechanisms that are in place to be audited and used, and not redundant policy processes like a long-term phase-out and a ban, which is
or like a cigarette butt charge without the cleanup of the cigarette butts.
Right.
Yes.
And they're gonna buy it online anyway.
Yeah, I have a question.
Should we start here?
You guys, you can questions, everybody.
Yeah, yes, you know, this street, like, you know, we've been here like for ages in the city of San Francisco. However, you know, you might not, you were not around when we were like in the 80s and the 90s, like.
I was around, I was
You were
I love you for that, but I was here.
But see, like in Agnews time, in Agnews administration, we were like the Arab community. It has 9 commissioners at that time. In Jordan's era, we have maybe 5 or 6. And in Mr. Brown, Willie Brown, we got a little better. We have better relationship. However, now maybe we have 1 commissioner or maybe we don't.
Yeah, we do.
We have 1 or 2, whatever. Yeah, we don't have that much representation in the city. However, I mean, you know, it's we do not we ask for the moon, but we do not get the moon. What I'm saying is, in order for us to get representation in the city, we need to be active too. Like I mean, there is, you know, so what's your vision if you become mayor for the Arab community?
Yes. Well, I mean, I am happy, this is an easy one. I'm happy to be supportive of recommendations for commissions and employment opportunities in the city and county of San Francisco. That is an easy one for me to do. In fact, I was one of the major supporters of Hala Hijazi, who's here. She serves on the Human Rights Commission. And I don't know if Nabil snuck out of here, but I'd love to put him on the Small Business Commission. And I can already think of a number of folks who are right in this room who would, you know, are at the top of my list for commission appointments without question. And if you have any recommendations for anything that comes up in my administration, I am happy to accept those recommendations. That goes without question. So thank you for raising that issue, because I think that when we're making these policy decisions, it's important to have a seat at the table so that your voices are heard.
Thank you. John.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, and thanks for all your service to the community. So, as a cornerstone of democracy, the ability for small groups to organize and change policy locally is empowering. But the homeless can't organize. They're in crisis mode all the time. And a lot of the candidates today were heard use familiar language I heard from Mayor Brown, Lee, and Newsom. Those guys did not solve the problem.
Yeah.
How would your leadership be different?
So let me just tell you a little bit about, you know, what I'm proposing around mental illness, because it's very lengthy a little bit, but I think it's important to know that it does involve, you know, taking away someone's rights. And I think that's probably, I've taken the most controversial stand around people who are homeless, who sadly are suffering from mental illness. I don't think it's okay to just basically arrest someone, put them on a 5150 hold, and then they're right back on the streets, and they're, you know, completely out of their mind. And so I've already passed my legislation to take the responsibility of conservatorship, that is providing a guardian for someone who can't make decisions for themselves, taking that responsibility out of the DA's office and putting it into the city attorney's office to treat those cases like public health cases and not criminal cases, and also making sure that the departments of aging and adult services, Department of Public Health, that they're not working in isolation, but they're working together to develop that case, to go through the court system for the purposes of getting that person conserved. We just opened 54 new mental health stabilization beds. About 16 are occupied at St. Mary's now. And so part of what I plan to do is demand that all of our hospitals have at least a location for mental health stabilization beds in all the hospitals in San Francisco, because this is a mental health crises in our city. So accountability, working with people to develop a well-rounded system for the purposes of addressing that particular population is just one of the things that I'm proposing to do. And yes, I've been criticized because you're taking away someone's civil liberties, and I don't take that lightly. I really don't. But we're talking about people who are mentally ill, who sadly are, you know, basically are being left to die on our streets because we can't force them into treatment or force them into help. I'm supporting Senator Scott Wiener's bill 1045 in the Senate now that basically adds addiction as one of the elements around mental illness, which doesn't exist now, which makes it hard for the courts to basically say, okay, we will allow the city to be the public guardian of this individual to make decisions so that they can get their medication or their support or what have you. It is controversial, so it's one thing that I'm proposing that's a lot different than everyone else for the purposes of helping even the few people I have on my personal caseload who have family members who want to help them but can't because of the way the system works. We've got to change the system. We've got to change the way we look at it for the purposes of getting people the help and the treatment that they need. In fact, in my district, when I served on the Redevelopment Agency Commission, we opened 120 unit housing development for those people who are chronically homeless, chronically mental ill, people who basically can't take care of themselves. We opened that place, and this around-the-clock support, around-the-clock care for those particular individuals who can't maybe work a job or do anything to take care of themselves. And it's our responsibility, you know, to take care of folks like that. I mean, really it is, because they can't take care of themselves. I'm planning to solve the issue one person at a time with the right solutions, but it's not a one-size-fits-all. So that's just one thing, and I know that's a very lengthy explanation. My homeless platform is on my website, londonformayor.com. It talks about some of the work I've done and what I'm proposing to do as mayor. I hope you'll check it out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to take one last question from the audience, and then we're closing remarks from Supervisor Reed.
Supervisor Breed, how are you? My name is Chris Weiss. I'm sorry for my voice, but I'm the CEO of Yellow Cab here in San Francisco. So I've got a couple questions for you. One is 25% of the vehicle miles traveled in San Francisco are done by TNCs, such as Uber and Lyft. 70% of the traffic, of the congestion-related traffic violations are given to these drivers. Do you think they should be regulated locally? And then what steps, whether legally or legislatively, do you think you can take to help?
Yeah, and so I do think they should be regulated, and I think part of regulation is, of course, having data. And just like taxi medallions, we need to somehow have a similar system for TNCs. But it's not just, you know, the Ubers and the Lyfts, it's also the delivery companies. And let me just be clear, I like having the ability to have all of these platforms, but there are so many of them. There's Caviar, there's DoorDash, there's, you know, just all of these things that exist, and these industries are moving faster than we can regulate, and some of these industries are regulated by the state. And I think that it's important, of course, to work with our state officials, but to also require that data has to be an important part of developing the policy necessary to regulate them. Because we just look outside and we'll see the congestion and we can probably stand on the corner and count. But these companies should be held accountable to sharing their data so that we can make the right policies. At least Lyft is open to doing so, but it's not just these companies. It's so much more that needs to be done, and that's one of the things I'm committed to addressing, and it's important for us to do, and not just continue to allow industries to just come into San Francisco, run shot all over the city, and then, you know, I as mayor have to hear about the complaints of it taking 2 hours to get from one side of the city to the next. I'm late here because there was traffic. So I want to address it, and I want it to be equitable, and it's important to make sure that I do so as mayor and work with our state officials to accomplish the goal.
Thank you so much.
Yes. All right.
All right, thank you to the supervisor. What I do want to do before we call it quits here is I do want to announce that I hope we got everyone's email. Like we mentioned, this is the kickoff event for the Arab American Democratic Club. So we want the community to stay mobilized and keep building off of this success. So please stay tuned for more email updates from me. Find us on Facebook. Please reach out to me with any other ideas. And I do want to open the floor if there's anybody else who wants to speak to the general public, or if there were any other candidates here. But please, let's stay settled for a couple more minutes. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I would invite...
1 minute, guys.
Yeah, stick around for a second. We're not quite done yet. Is anyone here concerned about domestic surveillance and the Patriot Act?
Yeah.
Yeah, you might be. I've been fighting it for 15 years, and I'm running to represent you in Congress as a progressive alternative to Nancy Pelosi. I graduated from Stanford Law School in 2003, and I've been fighting for your rights ever since. I've been the director of grassroots advocacy at the Electronic Frontier Foundation for the last 3 years. I ran the National Bill of Rights Defense Committee for 6 years. It was a network around the country dedicated to fighting transpartisan battles at the local level to address surveillance by local police. I've been endorsed by a whole set of groups, and I'll get to that in my platform in a second, but I want to share with you just a little bit about my story. I'm an immigrant myself. My family came from the UK when I was 2 years old. I was raised in rural Missouri. I went to college in Chicago. It took me 2 years and 10 careers to go through night school. I was being recruited by the State Department as a diplomat at the same time that I came to Stanford. Started there in 2000. So when I was studying law at Stanford, what I witnessed was the Bush versus Gore decision, the Patriot Act, the 9/11 attacks and the invasion of Iraq. By the end of law school, I was teaching constitutional law as a teaching assistant at Stanford Law School while I was organizing grassroots resistance to Bush's invasion. Does anybody remember the day that Iraq was invaded? What happened here in San Francisco?
Yeah.
Tell us.
We took over the streets of the city and shut it down for 3 days.
We took over the city and we shut it down for 3 days. Non-violently, we seized San Francisco by holding the bridges and the exit ramps from the highways, and we prevented commerce from happening, and the framing was stop the corporate invasion of yet another country. When I finished law school, I went east. I filed a marriage equality case in 2004, promoting the opportunity for same-sex couples to attain legal recognition for their unions as a Muslim in 2004. And I just want to note the significance of that. Muslims were not widely recognized for being promoters of LGBT rights. I recognize as an advocate for rights that rights are intersectional, and I recognize what solidarity means, and I've been building that in the courts, in the streets, in the media, and Congress, and without a seat for the last 15 years. Medicare for All is a crucial part of my platform. I want to fund it particularly by reclaiming funds from Pentagon corporate weapons contracts. There are $1.5 trillion available. $1 trillion, y'all. Can you think about what $1 trillion represents? Just try to get your head around it. It's a million millions, and half that again for a fighter plane that's been described as the object of procurement malpractice by Navy officials, a fighter plane that can't fight climate change, recognized by the Pentagon as one of our primary national security threats. It can't stop culture or election hacking. It can't stop a president from instigating an unnecessary war, but it's $1.5 trillion hole in your pocketbook that could go towards funding, for instance, everybody's opportunity to get preventive care. We've talked a lot about homelessness here today. Corporate medicine costs are one of the leading drivers of both bankruptcy and homelessness, so Medicare for All would prevent homelessness. It would expand human rights. It would increase the competitiveness of U.S. businesses, which are uniquely forced to bear the costs of their employees' health care in this country and nowhere else. Just a couple other things I'll go on. Legalizing cannabis at the federal level is a civil rights imperative. There is a racist war on drugs that, even separate from war on terror, is destroying the lives of individuals, of families, and communities all over the country from coast to coast. It is as much a racket as is the domestic national intelligence security surveillance system. Another piece of the platform that I'll just share with you, and then I'll wrap up and see if anybody has questions. In addition to defending civil liberties by investigating federal intelligence agencies, securing Medicare for all, legalizing cannabis to end war on drugs, I would like to address vote suppression and defend voting rights through a novel way you wouldn't have heard anyone else talk about. I was a legal scholar before I was forced by circumstances into resistance, but the way to defend the integrity of our elections, I think, is to extend the reach of existing antitrust statutes, which already prohibit companies from doing a range of things to undermine the interests of consumers, to also include political markets, which would then prevent campaigns and parties from doing the very same things, which they do all the time, that undermine the rights of voters. I'll talk about one of them. Pepsi and Coke can't get together in a boardroom and say, you sell on this side of town, we sell on that side of town. Political parties do this all the time. We don't have that problem in California, but around the country, that's how congressional districts generally are allocated. If we actually manage to crack the partisan duopoly that constrains the transpartisan consensus on each of the issues I've talked about, there would be a sea change in this country. The point here, please.
How can we have it even reverse Citizens United?
Yeah, you nailed it.
That's all.
That's a great question. Are people familiar with Citizens United? This is the invitation to corporate corruption by the Supreme Court in 2010. My second case out of law school was Shahid versus FEC. We were defending the congressional law in 2002, the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, which aimed to take corporate soft money out of elections. We won that case before the DC Circuit Court of Appeals 4 years before the Supreme Court destroyed everything we worked on in that case. So I'm very deeply committed to the issue. This bit I'm giving you about the antitrust laws is the way to get there. A lot of people concerned about Citizens United are pushing a constitutional amendment to deny corporate personhood, which is a high hurdle procedurally because it's a constitutional amendment, and it has a whole bunch of unintended consequences like keeping EFF or the ACLU or Muslim advocates from fighting for your rights in court. So corporate personhood is the wrong target, and a constitutional amendment is a high way to get there.
I'd like to talk to you about it.
Yeah, let me just finish the answer. If we're concerned about the integrity of elections, the way to get there is by subjecting the parties to antitrust scrutiny. And that's what's never happened before. And that's of course, thank you. I'd invite any questions. I have information. I'd be eager to talk to you. I'm running against Nancy Pelosi.
Hi. So I'm just going to say real quick, there's people outside. I think you guys have been sitting here for a while. Thank you for your patience. My name is Christine Johnson. I'm running a little bit more locally for District 6 Supervisor. The current supervisor is Jane Kim. She's turned out. For those of you who may not know what district you live in, it is Soma, Tenderloin, Treasure Island, and Mission Bay in the elections in November. So I came into politics because I moved 8 times, age 0 to 18. Every 2 to 3 years, we would get that, rent increase, and it was time to go. And so I didn't really have a childhood home, and that got me into wanting to build more housing from an early age. I thought if I could do that, then that's how I would prevent other kids from having the same upbringing that I did. I went to Smith College, I studied engineering, I went into public finance, I moved to San Francisco. I very soon got into public service. I was appointed to the Hunters Point Shipyard Citizens Advisory Committee, and soon learned that building community was about housing, but it was also about other things. And I know many of you are small business owners. I asked a very simple question, which got me onto my path for running for office. Why is it that in new developments, it's all going to be Starbucks and Walgreens? Where is the opportunity for small business? Where I come from New York City, so bodegas, but also the corner stores. And the answer I got was unsatisfactory. So that dug me into just learning everything there is to do is about building communities, infrastructure, economic development, housing, transit, education. 14 years later, I've served on the Successor Agency Commission, which is redevelopment, and the Planning Commission, which is where I've seen actually some faces that were here before, who have come before us to get permits around their small businesses. So I'm running to create safe and clean streets so that people will care more about their neighborhoods, to keep small businesses in our neighborhoods, and to make sure that housing is affordable for everybody. And District 6 is largely built out, so I will continue to push building more housing as fast as we can, but it's also about keeping the existing housing that's there affordable. So I wanted to keep it super quick. It's ChristineForSupervisor.com. You guys, I'm sure will see a lot more of me. And thank you for your patience, and please go out and mingle. Thank you so much. Yeah, Christine!
Nice to meet you.
Yeah,
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I saw you back at the head.